Hi everybody, very nice to see you all and so many of you again. So as Robert said, this is the fifth in our series of Artists Beyond the Studio, which are a series of Zoom lectures while we're in lockdown for members, associates and friends of the studio. I'm very pleased today to have Tom Phelan all the way from Vienna in Austria. Tom is an Irish printmaker and painter living in Vienna. He graduated from Dún Laoghaire College in Art and Design in the early 90s and found his way to Graphic Studio Dublin, becoming a member there in 1992. He worked there editioning prints alongside James McCreary and James O'Nolan and became studio manager and master printer in 2003. He worked with some of Ireland's leading artists, among them Tony O'Malley, Gwen O'Dowd, Donald Teskey, Mary Loan, making a wide variety of ambitious prints. In 2007 or 2008, Tom left Dublin for Vienna, where he set up a print and painting studio of his own. I'm interested in hearing about this transition from running a busy print studio in Dublin to setting up his own practice in a different city. Tom's work is inspired by the ever-changing urban environment, as well as the sea. He repeatedly visits a specific space, and it is this personal attachment and memory of these visits that provide the starting point for his work. Tom has maintained close ties to his friends and contacts in Dublin, exhibiting with Graphic Studio Gallery, So Fine Art Editions, the RHA, as well as the Moleswork Gallery. I hope Tom will tell us about this experience and the advantages and challenges of living between two cities. In recent years, Tom's work has become increasingly abstract. Rich planes of colour and texture evoke fragments of the environment through both painting and print. I would like to hear about how his painting practice has developed over the past few years and what influence his paintings and printmaking experiences have had on one another. So I'm really excited to be here chatting to you, Tom, today. So Tom, how you doing?
Hi Niamh, how are you? Hello everyone.
So can you tell me a bit, Tom, about how your career started and joining Graphic Studio Dublin? What impact did it have on your development as an artist? What was
well, I started in the studio really while I was still in college in Vienna. Sorry, when I was still in college in Dublin in Dún Laoghaire. So I went in around 1990. I did a course, a lithography course with Geoffrey Levi, who was Canadian, and Carmel Benson, who was my print teacher in Dún Laoghaire. She was one of the directors of the studio, and she asked me if I would be interested in having a go. So I said yes. So I went in there and on Saturdays, and it was a very strange experience going through that little red door in Green Street East and walking up that stairs. And then suddenly you come around the corner and you're in this huge space. And it was really quite an amazing place, really. And I didn't see James or Mary Fowle Powers there the first time. It was just Geoffrey, so it was a little bit more friendly. Well, less scary, let's put it that way. And so I started in that, and then so basically all my way through college until kind of 93 or the end of 92, 93. I was also working in the print studio making lithographs. And then after that, James asked me if I'd be interested to come in and do some editioning. So basically I just went straight from college straight into the graphic studio the next day. And I think the first artist I auditioned for was A.R. Penck. And yeah, it was a kind of a baptism by fire. I was just kind of
they're big prints.
Well, it wasn't. I was working on a sort of a small one first, but yeah. I was just handed the proof and pointed to the inks cupboard and the paper and just told to, there you go. We want 30 of them plus proofs. And I just remember standing up on the mezzanine, kind of going, okay, all right, and basically trying to work through it and figure out how to mix the colors. And really my print education, I think, really started in the graphic studio more so than in college. You were just kind of you had a freedom where you were kind of able to mess around a bit, But in the graphic studio, you had to be really clean because people were coming in after you. You had to get editions clean. You couldn't have fingerprints all over them, things like that, you know. So it was much stricter kind of setup. And as well as doing that, oh, there's one of the ill-fated membership cards that we had membership cards for a little while. I think that 1 year was it, and then we had those old enough to remember, we had a kind of a punch-in key code to get into the print room, and I think after a while people were just leaving the door with the brick on it open the whole time anyway, and that kind of got abandoned as well. But yeah, I don't know who we were supposed to show those membership cards to, but there you go. You know.
Well, look, they're great for posterity anyway.
Well, yeah, I love the fact that they're cut all wonky with the scissors and then laminated as well, you know. So so as well as working in the graphic studio, then I was also kind of involved with doing what used to be called graffiti back in the old days. It's now called street art, and I was spending a lot of time in about 19 in my second year in school. I was kind of involved with making stencils for like the band Crass and all these kind of punk bands. They had this fantastic logo, and it was actually designed to be made as a stencil. So I was making these and spraying these around town, mainly around the old Temple Bar before it was done up. And I was doing this for a while, and there was also handball alleys up off Griffith Avenue in what's now Charlemont housing estate. There used to be a farm up there that belonged to the Christian Brothers, and there was these huge, I think there was about 8 or 12 handball alleys, and I used to go up there and kind of do graffiti and learn how to use stencils properly. And then I started to make little animals. I was making originally first the rat from the Stranglers logo, and I kind of had the idea that I would go in, and there was a kind of, I remember down by the old Project Theatre there used to be a vegetarian restaurant there, the Granary or something, and I had a great idea to go in and spray all these little rats all along the bottom of the wall of the restaurant. And so I was doing things like that until I got caught by the guards in the laneway behind the Olympia Theatre, where I got an unmerciful kick in the arse with a George Webb, and they took the paint and the stencils, and I was kind of marked after that. There wasn't many people that kind of looked like me around that area at the time, so anytime I was seen, they stopped me and to check my bag. So I was losing cans of spray paint and stencils on a weekly basis, and it was very expensive, the spray paint back then. It was really dear, so I stopped. It just
decided to focus on your printmaking career.
So I was doing that, and then I was hanging around in Comet Records in Temple Bar, and they used to be further down, and then they moved to the corner shop, and they just asked me. Brian just asked me, who's the owner, said, "Do you want to do some work on the shop? It looks crap." And I said, "Yeah, great." And so I started. I started to paint that, and it was painted twice. The original one was just grey in behind, and then I had wanted it blue, but he didn't want to buy. He said it was too expensive to buy another tin of paint, and so we left it grey for a while, and then eventually it just got too grotty. So we did it with the blue. But I remember even when I was doing the Comet. The guards actually pulled me off the scaffolding twice, and because they couldn't believe that the shop would actually let me do this to it.
They didn't think that was a legitimate commission.
Yeah, and then I remember the second time I was pulled off the scaffolding, I was a bit indignant about it because I'd been up the top and they started shaking it, and I put it together myself, and there wasn't really anything to hold it onto the wall, so it was really loose, and I got down anyway, and Brian came out, who owned the shop, and said he's allowed to do that. And they said, no, we want the landlords, we want to hear it from the landlord. And I said, well, Paddy Oman owns the building, and that's his scaffolding that I'm using. So I think Brian actually had to go in and ring Paddy Oman, and that was kind of the attitude to kind of, you know, graffiti or what's now street art back then in Dublin. The really people weren't very interested in it at all.
Yeah.
So after that, we kind of stopped. I just stopped for a while. I did the old project theatre after Comet. I did a mural on that. I think was only there for about a year or 2 years before they ripped it down and they started to build a new project theatre there, and a few other little small things. But people just had no real interest in it. And I mean, Dublin was a pretty depressing place back then in the early 90s and the 80s. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty bad. You know, I mean, everybody looked like Colin Meaney. They all had Colin Meaney haircuts and wore George Webb's. You know, it was kind of a strange place. You know,
Yeah.
people forget that. You know, you just have to look at, you know, the commitments. And I mean, I remember watching the commitments recently, and the place looks like a, you know, Beirut. It looks like a bomb site, and you know that's kind of what Dublin was like back then. It was just
Yeah.
open car parks
Easy to forget.
everywhere where buildings
Yeah.
had been knocked down. You know, so yeah, it was lots of people with like tight perms, and kind of another strange thing men used to do back then was they used to turn the sleeves of their denim jackets up. They'd be sticking out. It was a really odd thing, you know. You'd have your perm, your denim jacket with the sleeves rolled up, and your George Webbs. Everybody wore bloody George Webbs. It was really strange. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole, and Neve, you're
Tell
supposed
us
to
about
stop me.
tell us about this picture here. This is one of the Last Suppers in Green Street.
Yeah, well, when Michael Farrell used to come over and do work, I was his slave, as he used to call me. And Stephen there was actually a slave before me. And then it was passed on to me. And when Michael was kind of very ill with cancer, he used to come over and he'd bring a Last Supper with him, you know, and he'd bring all the wine and cheese and stuff from France on Ryan's aeroplanes. And then we'd have a party in the studio.
Yeah.
And I think there was 3 Last Suppers we had with Michael before they stopped.
Yeah.
But this is all down in Green Street East, so it was. So
famous
so
yellow.
they were great. We just all sit around and drink plenty of wine.
Yeah. And then in 2003, you became studio manager and master printer at GSD. So
yeah, I've been working there for quite a while, and I've been doing an awful lot of. I was printing nearly every day, 6 days a week. I was printing down the studio, and it really just kind of took over life. You know, I wasn't really doing anything else. I was in printing most of the time, and James was retiring, or wanted to retire. So I've been working with James, you know, cheek by jowl basically for years anyway. And when he would go on holidays, I would be kind of there to make sure everything kept running and everything was fine, and there was acid in the acid baths and everything else. So it was kind of a fairly straightforward thing to happen, you know.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean we've been doing an awful lot of very large prints. I see you've got a print there from Gwen O'Dowda. Before those ones, while we were still in Green Street East, we did these really large carborundum, multi-plate carborundums of cliffs, I think they are, and caves from the coast. And I was also printing a lot of very large Tony O'Malley prints as well, with other people as well. I mean, they were huge. They would take kind of 1 or 2 hours to just get the plates ready, you know. Yeah. So we were working with a lot of people, and we had Stephen Lawler and Niall Nessens were kind of involved with as directors, and we kind of wanted to kind of invite newer artists in as well. We've been working a lot with more of the established artists, and we thought we'd kind of open it up a bit and get some new people in. And Mary Lowen was one of those artists, as well as Donald Teskey as well. So I mean, it was really nice to get some interesting
Yeah.
new people coming into the
Yeah,
studio
because
at
the
the time,
scheme
you
has
know.
been running so long. I think it's really important. It's what keeps it alive, is getting in younger artists and newer artists.
Yeah, well, we also started the student prize, which I think was 9 lessons idea to bring it forward. And basically, we would give 2 graduates or 3 graduates from the art colleges paper and inks and materials for a year, to come into the studio and to make some work. And that was a fantastic thing. I mean, I was the youngest member of the studio up to then. I mean, I was only a pup when I was brought into the studio from college. Um, so I mean, 10 years later, and I'm still the youngest boy in the place, was a bit odd, you know. It was it was a little strange.
Yeah.
So it was great to get some younger people in, and because people just weren't coming down. You know, print wasn't majorly fashionable. The studio wasn't in a fashionable area at the time. I mean, it was a pretty run-down area where
It
the
was hard to get to.
local gangs would bring people on a Sunday for punishment beatings, and that was really it. You know,
Yeah.
we had the U2 around the corner, of course, but you have to be careful sometimes that Bono didn't knock you down driving his car like, Toad of Toad Hall around the streets. But there was nobody else down there. So it was really interesting to get some young people who were interested to come in.
Yeah,
And
and some of them have stayed, like, and it's a great scheme, and we still get younger artists in, because I think it's always a struggle with
yeah, I think it's great, and I think a lot of people really, when they come out of college, they they have an idea of print, but it's not really until you're working in a professional print studio that you really start to kind of hone skills and learn from other people. And that's the nice thing about the studio in Dublin, and I suppose most print studios. You can watch people and you can see how they do things, and then you can kind of ask questions. There's never really any problems about asking questions in print studios, because it's so easy to make mistakes. And especially if you're doing something like lithography, which, I mean, lithography can drive you to jumping off a bridge. It's incredibly technical. So if you have people there that you can ask when it's all going filling in and everything, it's really, really helpful. So, and especially back when I was in there anyway. I mean, there was no computers or internet or any of this kind of carry on. There was the library and NCAD and the knowledge of the people in the studio, and that was really, really beneficial. And I tried to soak as much of that up as I possibly could.
Yeah. So in 2008, then you moved to Vienna. Did you find that hard? Did you find it hard to leave all the kind of connections that you've made in Dublin? And how did you go about setting up a studio in Vienna? And
We
why,
kind of
why did you go, I guess?
we wanted to, we kind of moved. I think it was it was sort of Dublin had become crazy expensive. The prices were going through the roof. We wanted to kind of get somewhere to live for ourselves and start a family. And we were trying this at home, and then some various personal things came up, and it just didn't work. And I'd been asked by my friend in Hamburg to come in, Jolt, who's a fairly famous tattooist, and he asked me, look, he said, come over here. You can do some tattoo work in the studio, my studio, and then when you get settled and you get some money, you can get a studio for your art and get going. So that was kind of the plan. And but Alex kind of got pregnant quicker than we had expected, So sometimes these things happen really fast, people, so be careful. And so Alex's friend was moving an apartment in Vienna, and we said, right, look, why don't we go there? Alex wanted to go back there because that's where her doctors were and stuff like this. And she said that would be probably the better place to have the child. So basically, she moved out and we moved in. And I was still working over in Dublin printing at the time. And so when baby number one arrived, there wasn't much work being done. I didn't have a studio then for about a year and a half. So I was doing some work back in Ireland, and then I was just doing some small work, drawing and stuff like this that I could do at home. It wasn't really possible to do anything else. I didn't really have the energy to do anything else because when Alice came along, she had a really bad colic. So at night time, Alex would feed her, and then I'd take her and walk up and down for the entire night in the kitchen where there was tiles and it didn't creak. And she used to fall asleep, and in a kind of a holder on my chest. And then as soon as she'd fall asleep, she'd wake up to be fed again. And so that kind of went on and like this. And so I wasn't really getting any sleep at all. So I think, between the two of us, it took us about 4 months to get to the bank, in the afternoon before 2 o'clock, because we didn't have any support. My folks were in Ireland, and Alex's mother lives down the far end of Austria. So it was pretty much just the two of us.
Yeah. So
that was good. So then this is the current studio that I have now. And I might have to move out of here actually in September, but this is where I am at the moment. So the two presses are both from Dublin, if you go back to that one. So that's Big Jimmy and Little Barry. Big Jimmy was made by James McCreary. It was in the graphic studio for a while. It used to be blue. Some of you old timers might recognize it. And then I painted it green and put some Go Faster flames on it and stuff like that. And the little press in front was a press that I had bought for Barry Flanagan, who I did a lot of work for in Dublin before I left. And he became a very good friend. I loved him very much. And when he died, his family very kindly gave me that press. And I wouldn't have been able to start doing any work in Vienna without that. So that's basically the start of my studio, that little press. So I owe Barry and his family a great deal of thanks for sending that over to me. So after I had that, that's an electric press, and it's a polymetal, and it's a great little thing. I kind of took the safety rollers and stuff off it because they just got in the way if you were doing a multiple plate, color multiple plates. And then about a year later, I got the larger press from James, and I got that sent over as well. So both of them came from Ireland, and the rest of the studio has just kind of it's just been assembled over the last couple of years that I've been here from places. The metal tables are all from IKEA, which are great because you can just wipe them all down. That little cabinet behind is where I have the acid. I don't have any water in the studio. I have no sink. So there's a bathroom and a kitchen on the floor. So I have to bring water down. So if I'm making large plates, if I'm etching large plates that will fit on the big press, I actually have plastic baths that I fill up with acid, and I use them, and then I put them away again. I decant them after that. So you have to try and maximize as much space in the studio as possible. Yeah. So having a big, large acid bath area wasn't good. It
looks like a very well organized space.
It got a bit of a clean before the pictures were taken, but it's usually very clean. I mean, I was kind of brought up by Mary Fowle Powers and James McCreary. Of course it's clean. I'm talking about the studio back then, especially in Green Streeties. I mean, I think Mary Fowle Powers was a huge influence on me personally. She was very interesting. She made her own paper. She did a lot of work spit biting and stuff like this, which wasn't really being done by other artists a lot in the studio at the time. And she was very, she was very committed to printmaking and to the studio. And the same with James. And I think the nice thing about James is as well was that he was very open to trying different ideas to make prints. People might have thought that he was a bit of a fuddy-duddy, but if you were making images and you had an idea of how to do something, he'd go, let's try it. There was never any kind of, no, we're not doing that. He might complain that it might break a press or something, but I mean, once it didn't break a press, and he got a cup of tea afterwards, he was fine. So
A valid complaint.
these people are hugely were hugely beneficial to me, in learning, I have to say.
Yeah.
Especially Mary at the time, so it was fantastic to be there, and I think working with James O'Nolan as well, which I did a lot with when he was working with artists doing lithographs. That was a very different dynamic working with James O'Nolan to James McCreary or to Mary, much more. He seemed to be much more laid back. I don't know how much more he was really, in his mind, but lithography is one of those things that can go wrong at any moment. And he had a different kind of approach. And I usually worked with him on Sundays and Saturdays and Sundays down in the studio. So it was a different kind of dynamic than the weekly artists that you would have in.
And then, so what about your work then when you left Dublin and came to Vienna? Like, obviously, I mean, I can see very clearly that you obviously had, having left the studio and the busyness, I think you had more time. Like, obviously after you had Alice and after
it took me about I'm not quick when it comes to getting new ideas for work. Like when I was in college in Florence in Italy for the scholarship, they wanted you to make work based on Florence, and I was walking around and I was taking it all in, but it takes a long time for things to soak in and then come back out. And before I came over to Vienna, I was surfing a lot up in Donegal. I was surfing most weekends. I'd go on Friday night after work in the studio. I'd have the surfboard in the car and I'd just drive straight up to Donegal. And I'd meet a few people there, and then Sunday evening I'd drive back in the evening, and then I'd be back in the studio Monday morning. So, and I loved it, and I loved the West Coast, and I loved being by the sea. So that was a real kick in the teeth. I didn't realize just how much I'd miss it, and I still do. I mean, if I think about it, that's one thing I get really homesick about. And really the first thing I do when I get home is go for a walk out by Bull Island. It's I kind of I go home, drop the bag, say hello to people, and then I'm straight on the bike or straight in the car down to Bull Island. I just need it. It's out by the wooden bridge and down, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. It's might not be the most picturesque, but to me it's heaven. It's because it's the first time that I'm going to get an unbroken horizon. All I have when I look out is just sea and sky. And when you live in a landlocked country, you don't get that. There's no break. Everything is busy. Everywhere you look is busy. And it's not, going up a mountain is not the same. Alex's mother lives up a mountain, but it's not the same. It's a different thing. So these paintings were all done when I started to make work again, and they were really, they caused a lot of trouble when I made them. Like there's this one and another one, and people were like going, "What is this? You're an abstract artist. What are you doing?" And a few people got annoyed because, they said, "Well, if you can paint like this, why are you making abstract crap?" I mean, this is proper painting, And then abstract people were going, "Well, what is this? What are you doing?" And I think a lot of people thought that if you make abstract art, it means you can't draw or paint properly, that it's kind of like an easy option to do stuff. So they were, these haven't been shown anywhere. These are in my studio still. I'd love to show them, but I if they confuse people, I'm not too sure what to do with them. And these are quite large. These are 140 by 120.
Yeah.
And from doing those large sea paintings, then I started to make prints based on surfboard design originally very loosely from the after the Second World War, when they started to use fiberglass and they started to use all the car paints and enamels. So you got these really kind of funky colors together, and I love color. I love saturated colors especially. It's really something. you know, people kind of say that some of the new work looks a little bit kind of Rothko-ish, and it's really, it's not. It's all really from graffiti that I saw. I have a book here called Subway Art. This book came out in 1984, and it's what got me into doing graffiti in the first place. And I was just amazed by the saturated colors. You know, it's, you know, when you get up close to and I was lucky enough when I went to New York, I got to see some really heavily graffitied subway trains. And you're just surrounded by this saturated color, and it's just the most amazing feeling in the world. And you know, I sometimes look at Rothkos and I kind of get itchy to get a brush and kind of finish them off a bit more. you know, it's like the start of a great idea, and then you know, I'd like to go a bit more. And yeah, this is a little. I have a fixation with Eileen Gray. I absolutely love her work. This is from one of her rug designs, and I just really love the shape of it. And the actual rug, I think, is slightly wider than tall. So this is a little panel. This is a wooden panel, and it's got paint. And it's the first time I started to. This has carborundum mixed into the paint. You can't. It's kind of hard to see it, but it gives it a sort of a velvet-like quality. And this is handmade paint that I made with. This is, as far as I know, Oriental blue pigment that I've made with it. And it's underneath the red, there's actually palladium leaf. Palladium leaf is like silver leaf, except it doesn't go black over time. And the glazes then, the red glazes are built up over it. And I just did it, and when I was doing it, it just reminded me of like being in the old Savoy cinema, you know, when you're waiting for the cinema to start and they have all those lovely velvet curtains with all the downlights on them, and everything looks really nice, and the tops of the chairs. So it kind of reminded me of a screen with curtains, and then those dark kind of red lines are like kind of the edges of the seats in front, if you know, and stuff like that. So I mean, most things that I do are kind of, they're not really, they're abstract looking, but they're all of things, you know. That's,
it's lovely that you can really see how printmaking has influenced your paintings.
Oh yeah, I mean they are, you know.
Over the years has informed how you make the paintings, which I think is really
yeah, and now and you know, for those paintings I was using carborundum as well mixed into the paint. I have this really fine white sand that I use now for, like, so the last show that was in Soul Gallery, those big paintings, they're all mixed with a very, very fine white sand to get that texture and to get the dullness, you know, so that you get the contrast between the glazing and the actual painted surfaces, you know. So between, yeah, so I mean,
so well really I guess what I wanted to talk about was that you've maintained really close ties with Dublin and with friends and contacts and galleries, and you come back to Dublin regularly to visit.
Yeah, well, Dublin's my main market.
Exhibit in Vienna and teach. So do you find it, like, is it kind of weird splitting your time between two cities, or is it nice?
No, I find it very very easy. I do now anyway. I didn't for a while, but I've kind of reconciled with that's the way it has to be. Yeah. I don't have any. Vienna's a very closed art scene. I don't have any gallery here. I do a lot of work with very well-known artists over here. Like, there's no introductions to their galleries and stuff like that. They just don't do this sort of thing. They don't tell you where you can buy anything. You basically have to prove yourself over a kind of 10-year kind of thing. And if you still hang around, the first time when I started to set up my studio and I had Barry's Press, I was introduced to one of the main printmakers over here at an opening. And my friend Tommy introduced me, and he says, "This is Tom Phelan from Ireland." And he goes, "Oh, the Irish printer who thinks he's going to take over and put me out of work." And he goes, "Nobody's going to come to you, you know, you're not from here." And I was really hurt by that, because I had no intentions of taking over anybody's work at all. And I just wanted to meet some other artists and other printmakers, you know, because there is no graphic studio in Austria. It doesn't exist. There is no group studios at all. There's one in Salzburg, but in Vienna there's nothing. So we're really quite privileged in Ireland to have so many print studios. They don't exist over here at all. So everybody works for themselves here and kind of looks after themselves. So my main market is Dublin. You know, I've got great galleries with the graphic studio, with So Fine Art. So everything goes home. I still call it home. It is home, you know. So I'm quite happy to do that, you know. And I kind of the only problem is, obviously, out of sight, you're out of mind a little bit, you know. So so I've tried now with Instagram and stuff like this to try and have more of a presence, if you want, you know, and not to be forgotten so much. And I try and bring work over as often as I can to Dublin, you know. So that's the way I work it. I kind of work for other artists here, Austrian artists. I've kind of given up trying to get introductions or whatever for galleries. If something happens, it happens. But for me, it's all about Dublin. It's all about Ireland in general. If I can get exhibitions anywhere outside of Dublin, I'd be delighted to do it as well, you know. So that's kind of it, you know.
Yeah. So some secrets about color. This is a bit of a sneaky one. I just thought you had some really nice pictures in the stuff that you gave me over, and color has always been such a really important part of your work, and I feel like it took it to a whole new level in your most recent paintings. And I guess you know, it'd be nice to hear a little bit about how you made some of them.
Yeah. This is the lengths you have to go to try and get a very pale lemon glaze without crap in it. I think I stripped this glaze off the painting about 4 or 5 times, and then I was like, okay, I need to come up with a solution to do it, or else change the painting and not have it yellow. And I'm a bit stubborn, so I kind of went no. So I made this. These are the rails that I use actually for drawing prints on. So I just put them up as high as they would go, and then I just got this plastic sheeting for painting for your house, and I just built a tent. And basically, I had one of those white bio suits, you know, to keep the dust down, and I didn't need a hairnet as I don't have any hair. But so I basically did everything I possibly could to make it a sterile environment in a messy art studio, and it worked. I only had 1 or 2 little tiny flies to pick out, you know.
Hallelujah.
So yeah, I wouldn't advise trying to do lemon yellow glazes, you know, unless you've got a really nice clean space. It's a nightmare. Which actually reminds me, we did some very large prints with John Noel Smith, and they were massive, and they had this yellow square on them as well, and that was another bloody nightmare. I think we had to use some of the lining silk to make a canopy over the big press to stop the smuts from falling down from the stove on Green Street East onto it. So yeah, I should have learned my lesson then. But I'm very happy with the painting the way it turned out anyway. So
that's good.
So this one here is another painting where I've been kind of building up quite a thick layer. That's paint. There's just paint. There's nothing else in it. There's a little bit of paint modulator or something it's called. It's a thickener. But and this is kind of very similar to the more recent paintings I'm doing as well. This one. This started from a little painting. This is a bigger painting of it, which I did basically after watching some of the commemorations from the First World War, from the Battle of the Somme. And I had made this small little painting, and it really struck me that the colors were very similar to the overcoats that the soldiers used to wear. And it's this kind of really heavy felty gray. And the ink the paint I put on it had this very, almost like a dark dried oxblood. And it really just felt like a memorial picture. I don't know why I felt that, but I did. And then I wanted to make a bigger piece from it. So you know, all these little marks as well kind of reminded me of all these crosses and little gravestones that you see in these places now. You know, that are just lines and lines of little crosses and graves from all the people who have who are killed at the time. So, you know, when it's standing upright, this painting looks a little bit like a mountain. But so these are the newer ones now that I've been working on for the last couple of months. You know, pandemic paintings, maybe you want to call it. But these all have a kind of a chrome painted surround on them. And again, this is another thing from printmaking. I was in the college. I teach in an art college here in Vienna, in the Kunstschule, and I teach print there. And there's another professor who does the silk screen. And I was downstairs where they're doing the silk screen, and there was all of these screens up against the wall that hadn't been cleaned out yet. And all the new silk screens are aluminium now. You know, they're metal, they're shiny. So they were all up against the wall, and they all had this kind of color on them, and they had this metal surround. And I just kind of really liked that. And so I started to spray paint, which has gone back to my graffiti, I suppose, in a way. This chrome, this is Matador, I think it is, spray paint, an acrylic spray paint, but it's actually chrome, it's not silver, so it's actually got a different kind of feel to it. So I put this on, and then the rest is layered with oil glazes, and then some of the final glazes then are the sand mixed with pigment that has been pulled through dot screens, metal dot screens on the top. So again, it's color. You know, I absolutely I love color. I love saturated colors, and especially colors that kind of work off each other. You know, these are only small little paintings, but you know, they don't, you know, they wriggle around for a lot of space, you know, when they're on the wall, you know.
And very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time, and I know people might have some questions afterwards, so I just thought it might be nice to go, you know, we've kind of gone from prints to paintings.
Yeah, and now we're back to prints, because I've got three new series of prints that I'm working on at the moment. They're wood blocks, and I'm going to have there will be a metal perforated dot screen printed on top of these now as well. So they'll have a feeling similar to the little paintings that are on the wall there behind it. There's Boris on the wall, my pet boar, and so these are still drying at the moment. There's about 8 to 10 layers on these already, and they're drying slowly. Let's put it this way. So I'm hoping to have these finished relatively soon, as soon as possible.
Yeah, look forward to seeing them there. And you're saying there's about 8 to 10 blocks on each?
Yeah, there's quite a good few. There was a couple I put on first that were very light glazes, and they kind of got soaked in a little bit, so it's actually quite hard to see some of them. But then again, I think that adds to the richness. You know, I think if it wasn't there, you maybe wouldn't see it. You know, and that's similar to those paintings that were in So Fine Art as well. I mean, I put an entire layer of paint down each time. It's not just a little surround. So some of those paintings may have, you know, 15 to 20 layers of paint on them. And maybe it's beneficial, maybe it's not. Maybe I don't need to do so much, but that's just the kind of way that they've worked. And again, a lot of that is due to when you look at walls. When I'm out and on the train, I'm looking at all the walls that have been spray painted with graffiti. I'm looking at the layering. I love that. I love watching the way the layered paint sits on top of one another in different colors and stuff like this when you zoom in on it. And a lot of the spray paint is done, and the graffiti is done on perforated metal on railway tracks and stuff like that. So that's why I use those kind of perforated metals and stuff. I really like them. They're a link with what I'm seeing every day, you know. The little blurb you read at the start all sounds very arty-farty about the, you know, but it's, you know, but basically it's very simple. It's just what I'm seeing and looking at all the time. And those paintings are all about memory as well, you know, so, you know, it all comes back slowly, you know, to traumatize me.
Really fascinating to get a little look into the studio. and get
Yeah,
some.
well, thanks very much for asking me to have a chat.
Does anyone have any questions for Tom?
Will those paintings, Tom, be on show in Dublin?
I hope so.
Woodblocks.
The wood blocks will be going over to the graphic and to So Fine Art, I hope, as soon as they're ready, if they want them.
Right.
The same with those little paintings. Hopefully they'll go over as well when they're dry. Things take a long time to dry when you kind of put that much oil paint on stuff. So I'm sure I don't need to tell half you that, you know. So you just have to kind of leave them, and I leave them up on the wall because when I come in, if I get any kind of odd feeling from them, I'll just take them down, and that's it, you know. So if they're on the wall for a while and they survive for more than a month or two, you know, I kind of say I feel I kind of must be happy with them, so they're okay then. Then they get wrapped up in bubble wrap and left to dry. But I do destroy quite a lot of stuff. I think out of that last show that was in So Fine Art, I think there's probably about 7 paintings that were destroyed. And I think maybe I'm a little too hard on myself at that because I don't have anybody really to talk about it with, you know. I think you're overcritical. I think if I had other people who I knew could come in and kind of go, just leave that, it's fine. But I tend to be a bit fussy, and I'm a details person, you know. I always see the details and mistakes in details, so I'm always trying to fix them. Well, maybe I should just leave stuff alone. So that's, maybe I should drink more gin and not worry about that too much. Yeah. But yeah, so hopefully they will be coming over to Dublin as soon as they're ready. And it's funny because, as I'm sure you know, once you're making art and making stuff, you get ideas for more stuff. So I hadn't done any printing for myself for quite a while because I was kind of just doing it, teaching all the time, and then I was doing it for other artists. So and it was lovely to have time to just paint, because I didn't have any time to paint in Ireland or anywhere to do it. And anytime I went into the graphic studio when I wasn't supposed to be working, somebody would come up and go, "How's the acid?" Or "Can you make me an acid bath?" Or "The Jax is blocked," you know, and or "We need resin in the resin box," or something. There was always something, you know. And so it's very difficult. So it's really, I do feel very happy to have a little space to go into, you know, where I can kind of just make art without people knocking on the door. And you know, so that was really, really nice. It's a really nice thing to have. So I was very happy with that. So,
Anne Gulich is asking, who did you first edition for?
first edition I did was for A.R. Penk way back in '92. The person I suppose I've done most printing for would be Tony O'Malley. I mean, the studio basically had me chained to the large press up on the mezzanine for about 2 years. And I just printed like 6 days a week. Tony O'Malley's really, when they came in, especially the large ones.
Just to let you know too, Tom, we have quite a few students here, print students from NCAD, who've joined the series of talks. So it's great to hear you mentioning how beneficial a print studio is to them.
Yeah, well, I think it's the lifeblood of all print studios is to get new people in, you know, and also, you know, as I tell the students here when I'm teaching them, that, you know, their idea of print is kind of looking at, you know, sort of just black and white images of landscapes and stuff like this, you know, or engravings, and you know, a lot of people don't see contemporary prints or even really look at them. So I mean, when I'm teaching, we have a beamer in the school, and I'm just constantly on YouTube, clicking on different things from different print studios that people put up. I've shown ones from the Graphic. I've shown stuff from Crown Point Press or Belfast, anywhere that I can find stuff, or artists making plates and stuff like this. And I think there's a great one of Norman Ackroyd on what artists do all day, which is great. You know, there's tons of stuff there.